All right. So again, the purpose here is to highlight some issues that you might need clarification on. The first of which is what we mean when we say the word congressional reconstruction. So, like in the world that was not APUSH or was not history, you might believe that congressional reconstruction could refer to any plan of Congress, which might include the Wade Davis bill back while Lincoln was president, or like military reconstruction during Johnson's presidency. But in fact, when a historian says congressional reconstruction, they're specifically talking about that second thing, this radical reconstruction plan that involves the military and occurs like after Congress has basically forced Johnson to let them do what they want. Like that's what we talk about when we talk about congressional reconstruction. If I want you to think about Congress during Lincoln's presidency, we'll say the Wade Davis bill, right? So whenever you see that phrase congressional reconstruction, they're talking about Congress during President Andrew Johnson's time in office, this after the Civil War, like fight for a more radical or more punitive plan. Everyone's good there? Similarly, if we just say the words presidential reconstruction, we generally are talking about Andrew Johnson because Lincoln isn't president very long during Reconstruction, right? He's killed almost immediately. So Lincoln does have a plan, and frankly, Johnson's plan is basically, I'm going to do what Lincoln did with a few small changes. But if I want you to talk about Lincoln, I will say something like Lincoln's plan or the 10% plan. So normally when historians just say presidential reconstruction, they want you to think about Johnson. And if they just say congressional reconstruction, they want you to think about Congress after the Civil War, this radical plan. Okay, so helping to make sure that we know those things. So that being said, let's now talk about, just as a review, what Lincoln's plan was. So Lincoln's plan was the so-called 10% plan, right? He wants to bind up the country together again. And you already know the 10% plan. He wants 10% of people to sign the oath. The only other stipulation that Lincoln has for the states that want to return is they need to accept emancipation. Just before he dies, Congress begins to work on the 13th Amendment, like trying to write the 13th Amendment to end slavery. And Lincoln supports this. But of course, he dies before that gets far enough along. And so, in any case, his plan was you had to accept that we're going to end slavery. And you had to have 10% of the registered voters from 1860 sign an oath of future loyalty. In the future, I will not rebel against the Union again. Louisiana and Arkansas are both readmitted under Lincoln's plan during the Civil War itself, right? They've been, they're taken over by the Union Army, so they are readmitted. But they're going to get kicked out again by the radical plan, so it gets a little bit more complicated. Remember that the Wade Davis bill is much harsher. They want 50% of the state's voting population to swear to the ironclad oath. And what I want to emphasize to you again is that the ironclad oath is different than Lincoln's oath. The ironclad oath doesn't just say, I swear I will be loyal to the United States. It says, I swear I have never been disloyal and I will be loyal. Which means that if you were a member of the Confederate Army in any capacity, if you served the Confederate government in any capacity, technically speaking, if you sold food to the Confederates in any capacity, then you really shouldn't be able to sign the ironclad oath. So this is going to, how long would it take before there were enough people in the state who could sign the ironclad oath that 50% of them would be they'd be able to rejoin the Union? It'd be a long time, right? This was going to delay re-entry for a long time. And Lincoln thought that was too big a problem, so he vetoes it, of course. But then he gets killed. Sorry, Mr. Lincoln. And shortly after his death, we do see support for the 13th Amendment, kind of rallying in his death, or in the wake of his death. And so the 13th Amendment will be passed. And now Johnson, who's carrying on Lincoln's ideas, is going to insist that states ratify the 13th Amendment, and then 10% and so on and so forth. So Johnson, remember, his plan is close to Lincoln's. But the little problem with Johnson's plan is his propensity to give pardons, right? When these fancy pants planters come to him saying, but we really just want to get our rights back, Johnson's like, I give you a pardon. You know, he feels important. And that makes Congress really unhappy. I did want to spend a few minutes here on this cartoon because this panel appeared, panel on the right, appeared on the AP exam a couple of years ago. I was actually irritated that they only included one of the two panels, because I think the cartoon makes more sense together. The words are cut off at the bottom, but I'll tell you what it says. So over here, the left-hand side, at the bottom, it says pardon. And then on the right-hand side, it says franchise. And then the big caption that went below both of them said, and not this man. And it was on the AP exam, all they had was, and not this man, and then this second picture. So I think that we're losing a lot of information when they cut it out like that. But so to clarify, remember, these are all supposed to be Confederate, like, elites, right? These are, you know, they've been in the Confederate military or served in high office. And they want a pardon. What would a pardon allow them to do? To vote, right? They were disenfranchised because they were high-ranking members of the Confederacy. If they get a pardon, now all of a sudden they can vote again, they can serve office again, like, they can do all these things. So here's, you know, Lady Columbia. She's looking at these people asking for pardon. She's going, I don't know what to do with these guys. But over here, who's this guy? It's not a name, it's not a person. He's a black soldier, right? So he's an African American, but he's a soldier. This is a Union Army uniform. He's missing a leg. He's clearly been wounded in battle, right? He is given of himself for his country. And the bottom it says franchise. What is the franchise? It's the right to vote, right? So to give someone the franchise is to give them the right to vote. So franchise, here she is showing this is a, you know, freeman who fought for the Union Army, sacrificed of himself, and then the caption at the bottom, and not this man, right? So these guys get a pardon, they get to vote, but not this soldier who fought for the Union Army. So you can see that the actions of black Americans through serving in the military, through advocating for their rights, really helps to convince a lot of people, especially radical Republicans in Congress, that they deserve the right to vote. And that's going to help to push in then the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment officially doesn't say anything about voting necessarily. It just says that all states have to give every citizen or every person born in their state the same protections as citizens. Well, as a citizen, you get the right to vote, you would think. The 14th Amendment also disenfranchises, like re-disenfranchises all of these Confederate elites, right? So Johnson had pardoned most of them. When the 14th Amendment is passed, they're going to get re-disenfranchised. And then the 15th Amendment finally will give blacks the right to vote. So we talked about the Freedmen's Bureau and the success of education, but the failure of land reform. We've talked about sharecropping and how that recreates the economic conditions of slavery, because if you don't own any land, then you're forced to stay and do the things that the people who have power and land do. We talked about black codes and how they recreate the social conditions of slavery, right? Take the idea of being a slave, replace the word owner with employer, and that's kind of what the black codes looked like. And we talked about the rise of those terror groups and the problems that they saw. So this is all happening in the first year and a half of Reconstruction. And so the radicals in Congress, Thaddeus Stevens in the House, Charles Sumner in the Senate, he's the same Sumner guy. He's back, right, after he got beaten up in the head. He has returned. He has recovered. So the two of them are going to campaign for increased rights for black Americans, right? They're going to point to the evils of the South. They haven't learned their lesson. They're trying to take over, to do things the old way again. They're going to point to things like the notion of black soldiers fighting in the Union Army and sacrificing for their country. And they're going to use this as an argument, and they will successfully push through the 14th and then the 15th Amendments. This is just a picture representation of, I already told you, like, after Johnson pardons all those high-ranking Confederates, then congressional elections are held, and, like, a bunch of Confederates, including Alexander Stephens, the former vice president of the Confederacy, shows up in Congress. Hey, guys. Long time no see. Let's get back to business. Oh, I didn't realize. So they're going to try to undo all of that. Okay, we will take tomorrow to talk about comparing those two plans, and we'll see you then.